Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today for Grants 101. We're going to do an overview on the Spring 2020 application in just a couple minutes. As I mentioned, this webinar is being recorded, so it'll be posted on our website and social media channels later, probably actually within the next couple of days. And if you have any questions, I'm going to go back to it. It'll be available. If you know any young adult survivors who are thinking about grants or in need of grants, please feel free to share this with them. And you can always follow up with us afterwards. We'll have our contact info later on. So let's get started. Welcome, everybody. My name is Samantha Watson. I'm the founder of the Samfund, now the Managing Director of Stewardship at Expect Miracles Foundation, and I'm joined by our Program Coordinator, Pastor Russell.
Hello.
If you have a question during the webinar, you'll see a chat screen, a chat window on your screen. You can send it right through there, and either Patrick will just answer you directly or he'll chime in during the webinar and I will answer you directly. You can also send us an email during the webinar afterwards at grants@thesamfund.org. So we will do our best to answer as many questions as we can over the next hour. But if you're out of time or you think of something later, you can always reach out to us. Really our intention with this webinar is to be as helpful and as transparent as possible, not only about the application process itself, but also about the program and our funding priorities and sort of how our committee operates and what makes a strong application. And so, you know, if there's anything we can do by email or during the webinar to help you submit a successful application, we are more than happy to do that. So right off the bat, for those of you on the webinar today who notice that we have sort of a new logo, or in addition to our logo, we just wanted to take a minute to make sure everybody knows that as of July 1st of 2019, the Samfund officially joined forces with a nonprofit called Expect Miracles Foundation. Expect Miracles Foundation is also based in Boston. We actually just moved from downstairs to upstairs in the same building, so that was great. And Expect Miracles is a nonprofit public charity that rallies the financial services industry and beyond to invest in life-saving research while advancing the financial and emotional health of people impacted by cancer. And while we know that everyone strives to hear the phrase cancer-free, we also know that cancer isn't free. So those of you who are familiar to the Samfund, you know that that's been our tagline for many years. And when we merged with Expect Miracles, the Samfund became a program, but everything sort of stayed the same programmatically. And so our grants program is continuing, our logo is continuing, our name is continuing. The only difference is that now these are Samfund grants provided by Expect Miracles Foundation. So it remains our mission that we support young adults who are struggling financially because of cancer through direct financial assistance and free online support and education. So really, from your perspective, nothing has changed, except that as part of a larger organization and with greater capacity, we're able to do more and we're able to do it better. So we are really, really excited. We're about 6 months in, and it has just been outstanding so far. So I know that you guys joined today's webinar to hear about grants, not to hear about our organization necessarily, so let's jump right into that. I'm going to assume that most of you are not familiar with our grants program, so if any of this is repetitive, just bear with us if you're already familiar with this part. But for those of you who are new to Expect Miracles Foundation and the Samfund, the purpose of our grants, as I said, is to support young adults who are struggling financially because there's so much focus when we're in treatment, to be cancer-free and to stay cancer-free and to be monitored and all this kind of stuff. But the reality that we all know very well is that cancer isn't free. And it's not just about the doctor bills. Those are obviously a huge part, but the cost goes so far beyond just those medical bills to include things like depleted savings accounts, time away from work, insurance premiums, COBRA premiums, and prescription copays, just to name a few. This is not a thorough list, but all of those things are true really for just about anybody dealing with cancer. But for young adults in their 20s and 30s, what we know is that those challenges are just that much more complicated because most young adults, even before cancer, don't have big savings, don't have, long employment histories. And so to have to deal with the cost of cancer in the face of all of these other things just compounds the challenge for young adults, and that's why we're here. So really our biggest goal is to provide relief from the immediate financial pressures that you're facing so that instead of being stressed out about bills, you can spend your time, your energy, any money you have on moving forward towards your goals. And ultimately what we hope is that by providing this assistance and by providing this community, it'll help you feel more motivated, more supported, and most importantly, most empowered to keep going forward. So we get this question all the time on how much is awarded in grants, and the short answer is that it totally depends on how successful our fundraising is. So the interesting thing, and if you look at this list, we've basically seen an increase each year, give or take a little. We had a couple challenging years there. But the biggest uptick was from 2018 to 2019, and that is hands down, unquestionably, because we joined forces with the Exact Miracles Foundation. And so it's our greatest hope that going forward we're going to be able to increase not only the number of grants but also the total amount in grants. And we may even see an increase in the average grant size, but for the time being, the average grant size is around $1,500 to $2,000. And what you'll notice, we could give a couple $100s to everybody who applies, but we've made the decision over all of these years not to do that. The Samfund's been around since 2003, and we started awarding grants in 2005. And from that very first grant cycle to now, really our goal is to make a meaningful difference in someone's financial situation. And truth be told, $1,500 to $2,000 cannot always accomplish that, but sometimes it can. And so even though it means that we're not able to fund everybody who comes to us, which is really, really difficult part of this process, if you're struggling to pay your rent for a couple months or you're struggling with some of the co-pays, a grant size of $1,500 to $2,000, and there's wiggle room on both sides there, may actually make a pretty significant difference. And so what we do ask, and we'll talk more about the grant application itself going forward, but just keep in mind this average grant size, because what we do ask is that even if your bills far exceed $2,000, which probably they do or you wouldn't be coming to us in the first place, help us understand how a grant of that size is going to help you. And so when our committee members review the applications and they have discussions about them, one of the things they're thinking about is whether or not we can possibly make an impact. And so, be transparent about the bills that you have, but also try and be helpful to our reviewers so that they understand how if you have, $50,000 in medical bills, how is $1,500 to $2,000 actually going to help you? And it's not a trick question. I just wanted to put that out there so that you keep it in mind as we go through the process. So who is eligible to apply? First and foremost, you have to be a resident of the U.S. Secondly, you have to be between 21 and 39 at the time that the application is submitted. So this year's due date is February 12th, 2020. And if you fall between 21 and 39 before that date, then you are good to go. If you are about to turn 40, submit the application the day before your birthday, because if you are 39 at the time of application, then you are good. So that's our age restriction. And then the treatment status is a little bit more complicated, so I'll spend a little bit of time going through this. It used to be, when we started our grants program, that we were able to say applicants needed to be finished with their treatment. But as we all know, that was 2005, which medically and technologically speaking was a very long time ago. And so we've tried to adjust our criteria to sort of keep up with medical advances. And we know that on treatment, off treatment is not actually such a clear line anymore as it used to be. So with that in mind, and with the help of our medical advisors, we've developed these criteria. Individuals have to either be finished with planned treatment with no evidence of disease, or at least 1 year following the completion of your planned therapy with stable disease, or in remission and either on long-term hormonal therapy, so things like tamoxifen, or in remission and on long-term targeted therapy like Gleevec or Herceptin. So we've listed out these 3 drugs because they tend to be the most common. There are so many more like them. And so if you have a question on this, and if you're not sure if the therapy that you're receiving qualifies you or disqualifies you, if you're not sure, just send us an email to grants@thesamfund.org. We are not medical providers. We know we are not medical providers, so we do have a medical advisors group that we can run these questions by. So if you're not sure before you take the time to go through the application process, just shoot us an email and we'll run it by them. Please just do that sooner than later so we have time to ask them, they have time to get back to us, and we have time to get back to you. So the last note on eligibility is that if you received a grant in the fall of 2019, you do have to skip a cycle and wait until the fall of 2020, the application will be available in July to reapply. If you are a past grant recipient and you've already skipped a cycle, you can apply, but past grant recipients or any grant recipients can only receive up to 3 grants total. Okay, so now we're really going to get into the nitty-gritty of what our grants are designed to do and what types of categories we will consider funding. So one of the changes that we made in the fall after merging with Expect Miracles Foundation was that we separated our family building application into its own program. And so you might have noticed in the fall, you might have seen some announcements, but for young adults who are looking for help with things like IVF costs, gestational carriers, adoption, things like that, there's a separate application and it will be available later in the spring. We don't have the exact date yet, but probably in a couple of months. So if those are the things that you're struggling with right now, sit tight. We do have funds available for that, but it'll be done on a different timeline. So a lot of times when we're asked what types of grants we award, it's easier to start with the things we will not provide assistance for because that list tends to be a lot shorter. So the things that we won't provide assistance for are business-related requests. So we've gotten requests to start a nonprofit or start a business, and that's not what our grants are designed to do. We also no longer provide assistance for undergraduate tuition. So this probably goes back about 7 or 8 years now. We stopped providing undergraduate tuition scholarships for a few reasons. The first was that there are a lot of organizations that provide undergrad tuition, which is awesome. And so we really wanted to focus on the things that weren't being addressed otherwise in other organizations. But if you are looking for undergrad tuition scholarships, there's a pretty comprehensive list on our website under resources. So I would recommend going to the samfund.org, clicking on Get Help at the top, and then clicking on Resources, and you'll see there's a list, there's a downloadable list, and there's a lot of scholarship opportunities out there. If you are an undergrad and you meet the age requirements and other eligibility requirements, you can absolutely apply for a grant. You just have to apply for something else. So it's not to say that undergraduates can't apply. It's just to say that we can't provide assistance for tuition. Credit card repayment also is not something that we can provide assistance for, mostly because there tends to be very little impact of us putting $1,500 or $2,000 towards a massive credit card bill because the interest rates are so high, it just comes right back, within a couple months. So we don't provide assistance for that. We don't provide assistance that includes payments or repayments to friends or family members. And this is one that sometimes trips people up, so I just want to clarify this. We know that cancer affects the whole family, absolutely. And I was in a position when I went through treatment where my friends and family members were incredibly supportive, and I was very lucky, and I hope that a lot of you are too. That said, friends and family members tend to be a lot more patient when it comes to repayment than bill collectors or hospital billing departments or people that need their money right now or yesterday. And so that's really the only reason for that. So unfortunately, we can't provide assistance to friends or family members. We can't purchase you a car, and we also can't pay for your wedding or vacation. So really, none of this is to say that these things don't matter. We know that they matter significantly, but when we have heard over the last 15 or so years from people who are struggling to put food on the table, who are about to lose their home, who, need to pay a bill right now, or they will lose something that is critically important to them, those things take priority. And so we've moved these things to the other list for that reason. If you have questions about specific categories of funding, you can find all the information on our website. The link is on the screen now, thesamfund.org/gethelp/grants. And you'll see that we've tried to condense it into fewer buckets. So typically it'll be things like living expenses, medical expenses, health and wellness. We have a category for one-time purchases, and there are a few others. So check out the list there. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. Okay, so we wanted to give you all some insight into what it is we're looking for in applicants. And this comes from 15 years of feedback from our review committee, feedback from our volunteers, and really sort of getting some insight into our review committee conversations so that we can share it with you. Because as I said, we're not trying to trick anyone. We're just trying to be transparent and open. And there are a lot of people who meet our eligibility requirements, age and treatment status and residency, but obviously we can't fund everybody who comes to us, and so there have to be other sort of criteria that we look for. And so this is sort of a condensed list that we've developed over the years with help from our reviewers. And all of this is just take it in broad strokes. You know, if you meet one of these things but not the others, it doesn't mean that you're not going to get a grant. We're just trying to be helpful, you know, and give you some insight. So one of the most important things is that you're able to articulate how your cancer experience has impacted your current financial situation. And there are a couple short essays, which you'll see when we go through the application. And really, this one is important because in the very first years of our grant program, we used to ask how cancer affected your goals. And based on that answer, everybody deserved a grant. We had a really hard time making decisions because it was very personal, and you know, there was no way to differentiate one from another because everybody really needed and deserved a grant. And so over the years, we've sort of refined the questions to really focus on your current financial situation. So, you know, we want to know how your financial situation as a cancer survivor looks different from your peers. So it doesn't necessarily need to mean that you had hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical bills and now you can't pay your bills. That may be one of your challenges, but maybe you had to take time away from work while you went through cancer treatment and now you're behind. Or maybe your cancer experience has resulted in, you know, a change in career or a change in education, or maybe you're dealing with side effects. Whatever your situation might be, please be clear how your cancer experience impacted your current finances. So good candidates for a grant also have immediate financial needs that are not being covered by either a spouse or domestic partner or a parent or other family member. And this is similar to what I said a slide or two ago. We know that there are things that, you know, financial needs that come up over time, and a good example is student loans that maybe are hanging over your head because the balance is enormous, but you don't actually have to start paying back for a couple of years. And so we understand psychologically that, you know, you want to be able to chip away at that. But if you're not actually making payments right now, then that's not going to be a priority for us. We want to know what you need to pay right now or soon, and what you're not getting help with. And so that brings us to the next bullet point. Good candidates for a grant are not able to get financial assistance from any other source. And so one of the things that we provide to our reviewers also, and that we're just constantly looking at internally at Expect Miracles Foundation, is what financial resources are out there in the cancer community and what's not being covered. Because if we have limited funds, we don't want to duplicate anyone's effort. We really want to make sure that we're providing assistance for the things that nobody else is focusing on. And so we do provide that list to our reviewers as well. So, you know, for example, if someone's having trouble paying for prescription copays, maybe we're able to provide a grant, maybe we're not, but we also know that there are several organizations out there that are better equipped to help with that stuff. And so, you know, take some time to look over our resource lists on the website and try and make sure that you're asking for things that you wouldn't be able to find help with anywhere else. Good candidates for a grant also are struggling financially either as a result of the treatment, so like I said, things like being away from work, losing wages, having high medical bills, or struggling financially because the aftermath is really hard. So maybe you can't go back to the work you were doing before, or maybe you're dealing with side effects. One of those things should be true. And then finally, good candidates for a grant are limited in their employment options, have lost their jobs, or sustained a major loss in wages due to cancer. So we know that cancer is this major interrupter, and we just need you to be clear about how it disrupted your life and your financial situation and how this might be able to help you get back on track. How are we doing so far, Patrick? Any questions?
No, everything's all set at the moment.
All right, excellent. So what do I need to apply? So the application is all online. We're going to take you through a couple of screens that shows you what the application actually looks like. But when you sit down to do it, it shouldn't take too long, as long as you're prepared for, you know, with what you need. So we wanted to give you a heads up so you can start to collect some of this information and be ready to, you know, include it in the application when you submit. So Some of it is just basic personal and contact information about your cancer diagnosis and your treatment. We don't want long medical histories or medical records or anything like that, but we do want to know what your diagnosis was, if you went through chemo, radiation, what the approximate dates were. We've gotten very, very long lists from people with every hospitalization and every last pill that they've taken. We don't need that. We just want to know, what did you have and how was it treated, and it's fine to just include a couple bullet points. We also need some information, obviously, about your current financial picture. So we ask a lot of questions about monthly expenses, monthly income, any assets or liabilities or debts you might have. And there are a lot of questions. Not all of them are going to be relevant to you. So what we ask is that first, right off the bat, please don't put zeros for everything, because we've certainly come across applications over the years where under monthly expenses and monthly income and assets and liabilities, everything is a zero. And our reviewers come back to us and they say, we can't make sense of this. There's no information here to go on. And so please be honest. We don't set any sort of thresholds, in terms of income level or anything that's going to disqualify you right off the bat. Even if you're making a decent income, you may still receive a grant because your expenses may cost you every penny of that income. Or there are a lot of situations where, things like that might come up. So please just be honest. Like I said, there's no magic formula here, but it is important that our reviewers have a very clear, thorough financial picture. So there's one form that we will ask you to have signed by a clinician. It's a medical history verification form that essentially we need to verify that you have actually had a cancer diagnosis. And so if it can be signed by your oncologist, if you're still getting follow-up treatment, that's good. If you're able to get it signed by a nurse, that's good too. If you're far enough out from treatment that maybe you're back to your primary care physician or seeing specialists, whatever your case may be, we just need some medical provider with a license number who can verify your diagnosis. So that form, start early with that, please. That's the one that usually gets people stuck in the end, because if all the forms aren't done and completed by the due date, which is February 12th, we can't accept the application. And so if your doctor's on vacation, if you wait till the last day to send it to her or to him and he or she happens to be out on vacation, unfortunately it's going to impact your application. And so please start early, download that, get it signed, get it out of the way, and get it back to us. We also ask for either recent 1040s or an affidavit, and that's really just to substantiate some of the financial information that you give us around income and things like that. So if you have 2 years of 1040s, please get those ready. If you don't, there'll be an affidavit that you can download. You just have to take it, get it notarized, which you can do usually at a bank or a library. Just call around. It shouldn't cost you any money. If you run into trouble finding a notary, let us know. We will do what we can to help. But most towns in some of their public offices will have somebody. So this next piece goes back to sort of something I said earlier about the average grant size, and so we want to put this out there to you just to start thinking about. So start thinking about what type and what size of grant would be most helpful. On the application, you can apply for up to 3 things, except for family building, which I talked about already. So, think about $1,500 to $2,000 in the face of all of the many bills you're probably facing. Where will that be the most helpful? And like I said, when you look at the categories of funding list, there are maximums in each category, and not everything will get as high as $1,500, and some may go higher than $2,000. And so, just be thoughtful about it, and be able to clarify for our reviewers how that will help. We're also going to ask you who the grant would be paid to, because we can't just cut you a check. So you'll see in the grant request section, we'll ask you for some payee information. So if it's your student loan provider or your landlord or, whatever store you want to buy a computer at, whatever the case may be, we do ask that you list a payee that's not yourself or a friend or family member. That said, we also know that this process takes a little while and things change. And so if you put down, a landlord for your rent payment and then a month later you move to a new place, it's okay. Keep us posted. If the payee needs to change, that's totally fine. But what's not okay is if you leave the payee information blank or you put in your own name. If you have questions, please reach out about that. And then finally, again, if you have a grant related to family building, we'll have a separate application later this spring. Okay, so next week, January 16th, the application will go live, and it'll be right on our website. So again, if you go to the samfund.org, click on Get Help at the top, and click on Grants underneath that, it'll take you to our main grants page, and everything you need will be there. A link to this webinar will be there, a whole bunch of frequently asked questions, and all sorts of information, and a link to the application itself. So when you are in the application, you'll put your name, you'll click Save, and you'll put an email address in, and you'll get a unique link that will enable you to go back to your application at any time. So make sure you get that. If you don't get the email in your inbox, the first piece of advice is just to check your spam folder because sometimes that's where it lands. And if you still don't see it after a little while, then let us know and we'll try and help you. But that link will be really important. Take the time to read through the application, read the instructions, read it carefully. A lot of times people are disqualified or don't receive grants because they just didn't answer the questions or they didn't provide the information that we were asking. I will reiterate again, we're not out to trick anybody. We're trying to be as clear as possible as we can, but it also, is dependent on you to read carefully and to be thorough in your answers. So make sure you're answering every question to the best of your ability. These do not need to be, Nobel Prize winning essays. They don't need to be even all that long. You just need to give us the information that we're asking for. So be as thorough as possible and be as clear as possible. And then finally, when you click send at the end of this whole process and you submit the application, make sure that you have an email confirmation in your inbox that says something like your application has been successfully submitted. If you hit send and you think you submitted your application and you don't see that email confirmation, please contact our office immediately because that's another scenario that comes up where somebody thinks they submitted, but we never get the application, and then in the end, something happened and it didn't go through. So we want to try and prevent those situations as best we can. So after you submit, if you don't get the email confirmation, let us know. So here's what the application looks like. You'll notice on each page there's a lot of text, and we have tried to do the best we can to put the most important things in bold and in red, you'll see right here. But we also try hard to be concise as best we can, and we think that all of this information is really important. And so please take the time to read through it. This is the home screen. It's the eligibility screen. You'll put in, as I said, first and last name and your email, and then you'll get a link emailed to you. Okay, so far so good. Easy first page. So here's the eligibility screen. This is just to make sure that you fall into the categories that I listed before about age and treatment status and whether or not you have received a grant either more than 3 times or very recently. So assuming that you fall into all of the right categories, you will be cleared to apply. If anything comes up as a question, you will know on the screen. And if you're not sure how to answer any of them, again, please just reach out. You'll see that's a theme throughout the whole webinar. But when in doubt, if you have a question, just contact us and we'll do our best to help you. Okay, so this is what you will get from FormStack when you submit that first little part. And the line in blue that says click here to continue your submission is your unique link. So make sure you have this in your inbox. And if you don't, let us know. Okay, so the medical history verification form I actually already talked about, but just to recap, you'll be able to download the form from within the application. You can fill in your name and contact info and then send it to your doctor, either put it in the mail or send it via email. And then your doctor or nurse will then have to fill out everything else. They'll be asked questions about your eligibility criteria, and then best case scenario, they will return it to you, and then you will upload it with your application. So make sure you build in time for that. And if you need any help uploading the form, or you have any questions, or your doctor has any questions, grants@thesamfund.org, shoot us an email. It is the quickest way to get an answer. And like I said, this is what we recommend starting with, because doctor schedules are really busy. And so just make sure that, this is done and squared away so that you can include it in your application. So as I mentioned, you'll need tax returns. So we ask for the first 2 pages of your 2 most recent 1040s, excuse me. And you can either upload it as one file, you can upload them separately as 2 files. It doesn't matter to us. If you didn't submit taxes, then, like I said, you'll need an affidavit to get notarized. And as I mentioned, you can find a notary usually in a library or a bank or a town office, sometimes even places like insurance agencies, real estate agencies, maybe even a car dealership has them. So just make a phone call if you're not sure, and also make sure that they're not going to charge you, because they shouldn't. Okay, so when you get to that part of the application and you have your paperwork ready to go, you'll see, as you see on the screen, this is what you'll see in the application. So if you'll have to answer questions about whether you filed taxes. If you click yes, then it will prompt you to upload either the 1 or 2 files for the first and second page. If you click no, it'll prompt you for the affidavit. So this stuff, if you have technological questions about it, let us know, but it should be pretty straightforward if you have the paperwork at the ready. Okay, so this is the very last page, and I realize we skipped over the ones with the essays, but it's just in the interest of not giving anyone an unfair advantage to start early. But, the essays get to the heart of the questions I was mentioning earlier. How has cancer impacted your financial situation? How's the grant going to help you? Those kinds of things. But those are the screens that are missing in this, so don't be surprised when you log in and the application is actually longer than what you just saw. But all the financial questions that I mentioned, all of that's in here. This is the last page, so please make sure that your forms are uploaded. Please don't upload a blank form or write us a note that says, I'll submit this one later, because if you're missing a form, it won't actually let you submit. So sometimes what people do is they'll submit a blank form and just intend to submit it later, but that doesn't work for us, unfortunately. It just makes things too complicated, and so make sure you have everything uploaded just as you want it. You can review it. You can, make sure as you're going through this process, you're clicking that Save button at the bottom. And then when you're done and you're happy with where it is and all of your forms are there, click Send, and then you'll get that email confirmation. So if for some reason you're having trouble or you don't have the ability to upload the form themselves, so the medical history form, the tax forms, you can send them to us with the caveat that we need time. If every last applicant asked us to do it, we would not be able to get it done in time for everybody. So if you can do it yourself, that is ideal. If you need our help, you can email it to us at grants@thesamfund.org. You can fax it to us. The fax number is on the screen. The due date for the application is February 12th, but we ask that you please send in any forms no later than February 10th, because that will give us the 10th, the 11th, and the 12th to make sure that the forms are uploaded. Because, and Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think even once the forms, if you send them to us and we upload them to your application, you still have to log in and submit the application. Is that correct?
So that's how we've been doing things in the past. It very much depends on the status of someone's overall application. So, for example, if we need to upload those forms and there are still elements that need to be completed, then yes, the applicant would need to go back through and submit it. If that's the only item that's remaining, sometimes we can submit it on your behalf, but we do need to confirm that everything is completed to your satisfaction, because of course, we would never want to submit an incomplete, application for someone else. One other thing to note is that it's very important to save your application as you go through. A technical issue that we've noticed is that sometimes applications can time out if they're left open for too long. So for example, if you start working on an essay, you leave to go to the doctor's office, come back and try to submit it, those are the situations where the application might not come through on our end. So as long as you're saving consistently, you'll be able to hop right back in where you left off. For example, if you don't see that submission confirmation at the very end, it's very likely that your application is timed out, and you would want to reopen your saved copy and then just hit submit. 90% of the time, that's the feedback that we'll provide when you contact us. So yes, it's really important to save as you go through your application. Please make sure that you upload everything ahead of time, or if you do need technical help, do also make sure to give that plenty of time so that we can deal with any issues that might come up.
Awesome. Thanks, Patrick. Yes, start early, and save. Actually, probably could have condensed this whole webinar into those 4 seconds. Okay, so a couple last thoughts, and then we'll open it up for questions. Please be sure everything is correctly filled out and uploaded before you submit. I know we've already said this now twice, I think, but it is really important because once it happens, once you click submit and once everything's done, we can't check it for mistakes. We could answer your questions. It may not be helpful. And so before you click submit, please make sure that you are happy with the application, that you know that the forms are uploaded correctly, all of these things. If you're not sure, please let us know. But in the end, any applications that are incomplete, missing a form, having correct forms, are just not going to go to our review committee because our review committee, they're all volunteers. They do this because they're good people who want to help, and we want to make sure that we're making the most of their time and effort, and there's no reason to send them an incomplete application, so it won't even make it to our review committee. So please make sure you start early, you're happy with where the application is, you have everything uploaded correctly and filled out, and submit it on time. So with that, the application is available beginning next Wednesday, January 16th. It'll be up sometime in the morning. Totally depends on how fast our internet is working that day and whether the technology gods are with us. So we don't like to put an exact time, but it usually is in the morning. And the deadline is Wednesday, February 12th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. So we also have gotten calls from people panicking on the West Coast because they think it's 5 p.m. Pacific Time. It's not. 5 p.m. Eastern Time, so please don't wait till 5 p.m. Eastern Time, though. We do always get submissions at 4:59 on the due date, and in the best case scenario, that's fine, but more likely there's some glitch that happens, and at 4:59 you try to submit, and at 5 o'clock your internet times out, and then there's no application. So please don't wait till the last second. Like I said, start with the medical history form, get it to your doctor soon, and then from February 12th, we will do some administrative work on our end to get everything organized. We'll send it out to our review committee. They will have their calls probably over the course of late February through March, depending on how many applications we have. And then we'll run their recommendations by our board. We'll finalize the list. And everybody, whether or not you're receiving a grant, will get a notification from us by early April. So again, we can't put an exact date on it. And we know that come early April, the phone will start ringing a lot. So we know that you'll all be anxious, and please know that we are doing the best that we can to get back to you as soon as we possibly can. But it will be sometime in early April. So if you need any help, grants@thesamfund.org is definitely the quickest, best way to get an answer. We also, again, would recommend that you spend some time on the grants page of our website, thesamfund.org/gethelp/grants, and start early and let us know if you have questions. So with that, are there any questions that we can try to answer for you now?
We had a couple of questions come in, and I've sent out some chat responses to those. So if you do have any other feedback or questions, now would be an excellent time.
Yes, thanks for fielding those during the webinar. Chances are good that if you have a question, other people have the same one, so we are happy to answer them.
Okay, we we have one more question. Will there be a Grants 101 webinar for the family building grant?
Yes, indeed. We will probably put it out in advance on our social media channels like this one. I'm just not sure exactly when it will be. So if you're on social media, make sure you're following us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We put out the announcements as soon as we know them. But yes, there will be a Family Building 101 Grants webinar. All right. Well, if we have no other questions, I will give you all 20 minutes back in your day. Thank you so much for taking the time to educate yourself on this and get your questions answered. And we really appreciate you taking the time to think through this process and just be proactive. And so, like I said, any questions, reach out. Feel free to reference this webinar at any time. And most importantly, share it with anyone you know who might be struggling and needs some extra support. So thanks, guys. Have a great rest of the day.
Before you go, Sam, it looks like we do have two last questions.
Oh, okay. Great.
Yeah. So the first one says, do you say it will be until April before decisions? Yes. So unfortunately, we don't have a firm timeline on when notifications will go out. Early April is our best guess. So it is possible we may send out decisions before that, around that time, or even a little bit later. It really depends on how the process is going at that point. But early April is our best guess for when you will hear back. And everyone who applies will receive some kind of notification. Usually, at minimum, we'll send out something by email to you. We have a second question that says, can medical records be submitted in lieu of the form for the doctors? Unfortunately, no. We almost never require any kind of medical records on our end. The only thing that we need is that brief form. So I would just ensure that they return that back to you as soon as possible. If we do receive a form and we haven't received a completed application for that, we'll do our best to find out who that form might belong to, but we always recommend that a doctor's office return that form specifically, and then that they send it to you so that you can attach it to your application before you submit it.
Yes, and one thing I would add to that, one of the issues is a paperwork issue. If everyone sent all their medical all their medical records, we wouldn't have room for anything else in our office. But I would actually caution anyone who's thinking about sending medical records to give that a second thought. We've created this application and all of the forms not only with the help of our medical advisors, but with the help of our attorneys. And so we want to make sure that we're keeping your information safe and that you're keeping your information safe. And so if you submit medical records, especially if you email them, sometimes even if you put them in the mail, your medical record number is on there, your birth date is on there, your Social Security number may even be on there, and we just don't want to put that at risk. We don't want you to put that at risk. And so the medical history verification form gives us everything we need. And so, that's why that we do that. And by the same token, when you submit your 1040s, please black out your Social Security number. We don't need that information. We don't keep any of this information after the review process, and anything that is stored in the application is completely secure. But just be mindful of the information that you are sharing. And we purposely don't ask for medical records for that reason, so please don't send them because we don't want your information to be at risk.
And to be fair, we essentially just shred, medical records that we receive. So it's really not worth the time and energy for those.
Yes.
We do have two more questions.
Great.
So one says, are the forms to have the doctor sign off on available now for us to send in, or is it only available when filling out the application? Unfortunately, it is only available in the application. That's going to be on page 5 of that application. But again, the application itself is going to be available for a few weeks. So as long as you start early, that should be plenty of time to have a medical professional sign off on that form. And I believe that Sam has already covered this, but just as a reminder, that doesn't need to be filled out by the oncologist that you saw, during treatment. As long as someone has a medical license and is, again, licensed to attest to someone's diagnosis and treatment history, that's all you need, so that can be a nurse that's available, for example. We have another question here. I work at a long-term follow-up clinic. Do you have a flyer that we can provide to our young adults explaining the grant and the process? To my understanding, I don't believe we have updated flyers available right now. Do you have any other information on that, Sam, that I'm not aware of?
So you are correct, and this is on the list of things that we keep meaning to do since we became part of Expect Miracles Foundation. So unfortunately, we don't have anything that in hard copy, but to whoever asked that question, first of all, thank you for participating in this webinar on behalf of your patients. We really appreciate that. Send us an email, and I do have a PDF at least that I can send to you that has a lot of information on it. And if you are able to print it out, if you come across young adults who might need, might want to know about our grants program, you can certainly share it. So it's not as beautiful as a glossy rack card. Hopefully at some point we will have those again. But for now, most important is that we get the information to people who need it. So if you email us, we can send you something to give to them.
Awesome. And we have one more. If my daughter's request is specific to reconstruction and treatment was over 5 years ago in another state, would the cosmetic surgeon's signature suffice, or will we have to send the form to the oncologist? So I do believe that the cosmetic surgeon would be able to complete one of these forms. Again, as long as someone has a medical license and can attest to someone's diagnosis and treatment, they can pull up your medical records, etc. They should be able to do this. And there is a section on the form that will ask for that license number too. So if you have any questions about whether or not they'd be able to fulfill that role, I would actually touch base with them directly and see if that's something that they can do. But I believe that there shouldn't be a problem with that.
And actually, you just brought up a good point, Patrick. When somebody else asked about starting early with the form, we can't provide the form to anyone until the 16th, but you certainly can give your doctor's office a heads up that you're either going to, next time you're in, you need someone to sign this form, or you're going to be emailing it to them just to, make sure they see it and make sure they know it's coming. So that's no problem.
And one other note that might be helpful, the particular format of these forms doesn't really matter, so whichever way is the easiest for you to communicate that back and forth, if that means a picture on your phone, for example, that's perfectly fine, again, as long as what we're receiving is legible. So, of course, you'd want to make sure if you're using a picture from a phone that it's the right size, that we can read it, all that good stuff. But it doesn't need to be, particularly official or follow any specific format.
All right. Any last questions? All right. So we didn't quite give you 20 minutes back of your day, but we will give you 15. So thank you guys again for participating in this webinar. Good luck to all of you, and let us know how we can help. Have a good rest of the day, everybody.